r/explainlikeimfive. Nowhere126 says. Explain like I'm 5. Why does China want Taiwan? China already has a huge land, big area of Asia. Why does it care so much about a small island next to it? Stainer Din Zurich says. Why does anyone want anything? Boobs, obviously. Omegaj 8006 says. It's called imperialism. Humans love power. They believe money and land grants power. China, like every other group of humans that have ever existed since the dawn of civilization, crave land. That's why China takes land, Tibet, and creates new land, Great Wall of Sand, and will forever look longingly at Taiwan until it is well within their grasp, like Hong Kong. Other examples, UK and Falkland Islands. Every other European country and its enslaved territories over the past 400 years. USA and its military bases around the world. M3@Boy says. Right now China can't get its goods to the ocean and must go through other, generally us-friendly waters. It is surrounded by Korea, Japan, Philippines, and Taiwan. The historical failure of everyone to figure out what Taiwan is and how it relates to China now allows China to push the agenda that Taiwan is not independent. It's also why they are poking around the Philippines. r/explainlikeimfive. Superjacket says. Explain like I'm 5. Why is bacterial meningitis so much deadlier than viral meningitis? I read that bacterial meningitis is life-threatening and requires immediate medical attention, but viral meningitis often gets better by itself. How can it be so different when they are doing the same thing internally? Bizuax says. I had bacterial meningitis at 19. I was 6 feet 6 and around 180 when it started, which on its own was a story. It came on and abruptly while driving to my girlfriend's house. I was peak teen happy on a sunny summer day, healthy as can be. 1 second later I projectile vomited about 10 pounds of puke across a lane of traffic. I recover in a few minutes. I'm like okay, okay. 10 minutes later, repeat. I got about halfway to her house and I lost all strength and had fevered so fast and high that I had become almost delirious. I had the wherewithal left to pull over and that's all I know of the story until my girlfriend found my car with me passed out on the shoulder of the road a few clicks from her country home after being an hour or more late. I spent 3 months barely cognizant. Fever so bad I would damn near speak in tongues. Constant ice baths. Spinal fluids being drained. I didn't eat solid foods for months. I couldn't so much as have a pillow under my head or I'd violently vomit everything but my organs. I was so weak I couldn't move. I atrophied down to 125 pounds by the time it was over. It took weeks before I could stand up when it abated. It took 2 years before I could consistently keep my weight above 160 pounds on my giant frame. If I had happened to have died from it, I wouldn't have ever been aware of my death because I was barely a functional human being. I know it's cliche to say I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. But I would wish it on my worst enemy if the intent was to have them suffer or be reduced to a shell of who they once were. Having gone through it, I can absolutely understand why it kills a large number of youth and elderly. I do not think I would win a second round in my 40s. I actually bet it would kill me now. Bob1 says. Had viral meningitis starting the Thursday before Easter break week my senior year of high school. I would not wish it on anyone. The pressure in my head was unreal, a high fever, and the room. For 2 straight days, if I opened my eyes the room was spinning faster than a merry-go-round. Grandma brought me a bucket to pee in, a can I repeatedly threw up in, and I didn't eat and barely drank. We were poor and had a farm. Finally went to the doctors the following Tuesday who sent us to the ER where they did that spinal tap after some imaging stuff. Never ever again, if I can help it. r/explainlikeimfive. Technical at 42.99 says. Explain like I'm 5. Why do chewing gums lose flavor so quickly? Why can't they create a chewing gum whose flavor lasts at least an hour? A bit complicated says. When I was a kid my juicy fruit gum flavor would last all day. I put it on the headboard at night and would chew it again the next day. We didn't have a lot of money. I think the gum makers just want you to buy more gum, and so they make it so the flavor disappears quickly. Drowning in a mirage says. Another aspect of this is that just like your nose, your tongue can become accustomed to a flavor and start tuning it out, just like you can stop smelling stuff after a bit. This combines with the flavor just getting digested to make really long-lasting gum a difficult proposition. I know this because I've got a throat issue which causes me to regurgitate food very regularly, and I swallow my gum a lot, so I also end up regurgitating that gum up. When I swallow the gum, it doesn't taste like anything, but when it comes back up a few minutes or hours later the mint or other flavor is noticeable, albeit not nearly as strong as it was when it was new. Shadow Puppet says. Drink a small amount of sugar syrup while chewing the gum that had lost its flavor and you'll get the flavor back almost instantly. Itangi52 says. The old stride used to last forever. They're certainly capable, but then they don't sell as much. r/explainlikeimfive. Stitch Method says. Explain like I'm 5. How do plane crash investigators determine what broke mid-air versus what broke when it hit the ground? When a plane crash occurs, usually there are hundreds of bits of plane shattered everywhere. I watch shows like Air Disasters, but they never explain how they know the right wing flap came apart mid-air or know how the fan blade dislodged on impact and not in the air. Willybird says. Another thing that I've heard is they'll check to see if the dead pilot's wrists are snapped. If they are, they had the flight stick in hand when it hit the ground. Wet Ass Buttcheeks says. I think the recovery teams collect everything they can in the area with multiple sweeps. Then they lay it out as best as possible and pretty much try and figure out what happened where. I think they have logs and stats on damn near every part. It's pretty thorough from what I can remember. Reinhard says. Additional information comes from the black box which records all kinds of information, including the pilot control inputs and readings from the various instruments in the plane. If in the black box data, the instruments all show the plane suddenly rolling over despite the pilot's inputting roll in the opposite direction, it means there must have been something with the control surface or wings. Since there's a flap on the ground several miles away from the crash, that's a good indication that the flap failed, changing the lift from that wing and causing a roll in that direction. They can also pull up the recordings from the pilots, who won't know exactly what's going on, but they will at least discuss the fact that they are trying to roll in a direction, but the plane isn't doing what they want. Loud noises can often be r/explainlikeimfive. Silverstop says. Explain like I'm 5. Why are GPUs seemingly so critical to supercomputing vs GPUs? Intermutacrypt says. A CPU can do thousands of things, but it can only do perhaps a few dozen of those at once, and it used to be way less. A GPU can do perhaps a few dozen things, but it can do thousands of instances of one of those things at once. Even if the GPU has to take a little more time to do whatever the thing is, it's doing thousands of it, whereas the CPU is doing dozens of it. It turns out that supercomputing workloads are almost always I have this one thing I need done, and I need it done as many times as possible. There's a massive amount of work to do, but it's all basically the same. Maybe I'm simulating the weather across North America, maybe I'm sifting through a massive amount of observations from a telescope. I have a lot of stuff and only need to do a few things to it. Grat is not nice says. Back in the 1970s, all the most powerful supercomputers, cray, mostly implemented vector processing or float operations that perform on a vector, a one-dimensional list of numbers. This was integral to the numeric solutions that supercomputers were used for modeling nuclear explosions, for example. Eventually, general-purpose CPUs improved performance and got cheap enough for large multi-core supercomputers, and the vector processing units fell out of favor, except for a few applications in graphics processing and graphics accelerators. Those graphics accelerators were developed into the CPUs of today, and they implement parallel floating point matrix calculations much faster than any modern general-purpose CPU at a cost-effective price point. So modern supercomputers have gone full circle and use graphic accelerator CPUs or float matrix processing units for numeric simulation. r/explainlikeimfive. Phantom 111 says, explain like I'm 5, what is a trauma bond? How do you break them? Sasapihole03 says, a trauma bond is made when feel-good chemicals are released into the body when someone is being very nice to you. We call this love bombing. After them being nice, they can turn to being horrible, devaluation, and this can hurt you very much. They say horrible things to you and call you names. They might hit you or be unkind to your pets. You can't leave because your body wants those chemicals to come back. You hang around for a long time hoping to get your fix again, so you can feel better. When you don't have your fix, you feel very, very bad. The horrible person knows this, and they use it to keep you around. In time, after someone goes between being nice and being horrible, your body becomes addicted to those chemicals and you can't do without them. This is why people who are with horrible people can't leave. It's not that they are weak or stupid, it's that their bodies crave the chemicals so much that they hang around in case they come back. There's only one way to break a trauma bond, and that's to leave the horrible person. For some people, that might take years and things have to get really, really horrible before they find the courage. When they leave, they are in a lot of pain because their bodies no longer can get those chemicals. It's a pain like being addicted to drugs or alcohol and you can't get them anymore. You can make it easier to break the trauma bond by making sure the horrible person can't come near you. You have to keep them away by blocking their number, stopping them seeing you on social media, and stopping yourself from seeing them. You have to get rid of all your photos, gifts, anything that might remind you of them, because if that happens, you might weaken and go back. If you do, you have to start all over again, only this time it will hurt even more. Going to therapy also helps, because you can learn things about yourself that shows you why you didn't leave the very first time they were being horrible. Therapy also teaches you how to recognize these horrible people and their bad behavior, and how to keep yourself safe from them in the future. There is no pain like the pain of the trauma bond. It hurts when you're in it, and it hurts when you try to break it. It can take years for a trauma bond to break, and even if you think it's broken, just seeing a photograph of them can make you feel really bad again, and you start wanting those lovely chemical feelings to come back again. So you have to be really careful to not see anything. Jiggersnate says, trauma is much trickier than it is often presented in things like pop culture. To share an anecdote, growing up I liked my abuser. They were kind to me after buying me video games or fast food I normally didn't have access to. I was old enough to know the abuse was a sure sign they were a sick and evil person, but it was hard to reconcile that with how much they said they loved me, or how often they gave me gifts. Sometimes the abuse wasn't even so bad, it wasn't always horrific or painful, sometimes it was okay. As I grew older I would read crime novels or watch shows like Law and Order, SVU, and see crying victims profess their hatred for the monster that ruined their life, and think, see, that's how a victim is supposed to act, why don't? That's all for this video, thank you for watching, please subscribe.